I'm Linda, and this is No Frills ASMR. I picked up this book a while ago. I think I showed it to you in a book haul video, and I forgot about it completely. It looks like I spent $2 on it in 2024, and it is called An Astounding Atlas of Altered States. What? What is it? The real stories of the states that never came to be. You guys know about this? I don't know. Somebody wrote something in it. That's nice. Published in 2010. Okay. 50 states is such a nice round number. It might even seem preordained that America would gobble up the perfect amount of territory to create 50 just right states. Sorry, it wasn't nearly that tidy. You know the winners. But dozens of other statehood proposals didn't quite make the cut. Some came remarkably close to joining the Union. Others never had a chance. Okay. All maps have purpose, perhaps even an agenda. Mine are no exception. Okay. What? Look at this. It shows Montana and North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Wyoming, and then Absaroka. And here's Mount Rushmore. Okay. Have you heard of this? Just what we need, another squarish Western state. You may laugh at the notion of Absaroka becoming a state. But the same people who proposed the idea may have persuaded your family to visit this region when you were a kid. The story goes like this. Because the area was so desolate, local business people figured they needed a monumental attraction to convince people to visit. What? So they carved Mount Rushmore. Granted, I'm leaving out a lot of detail, but the point is that many of the big thinkers who pushed for the giant president heads also thought it would be nifty to have their own state. I've never heard of it. At least that's what they proposed back in 1930. And then here is a fictional stamp. Never heard of that. Have you ever heard? My experience in 1971 followed the pattern of most other 10-year-olds. 12 hours of, are we there yet? Definitely. And then you get there and you're like, okay. Acadia. Well, there's an Acadia National Park. Okay. Or just Maine. Time for a divorce. What are these pictures? These loggers from Maine's North Woods would probably not have been interested in getting an aromatherapy massage in Bangor. And there's the rub. This is an educated guess of Acadia's boundary. Statehood proponents never produced an official map. Okay, so we have New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and then here's Maine, and then here's Acadia going all the way up to St. John, McLean Mountain. What does it say here? Today's Maine has split personality. The South is filled with fancy folk for whom the word summer is a verb. In the North are hard scrabble Mainers living in a still wild country of forest and mountains. Increasingly, the two groups have little in common. So in 1998, Republican Representative Henry Joy sponsored a bill to study the idea of splitting the state in two. Okay. Over the years, the name gradually floated north until it came to rest on a region that now consists of Maine and nearby Canadian provinces. A new fatherland in Texas. Fatherland. Adolfsverein. How about that? Maybe. Above the approximate boundaries of Adolfsverein, German colony. Opposite New Braunfels was the first Texas city created for German immigrants. By the time this map was made, however, the dream of an independent German state had died. And they show all this set up square grid and all these houses along here. And there's a river going down and another river. Probably good for farming. Let's move Germany to Texas. As bizarre as it sounds, that was the quite serious plan of some rich and influential Germans in the mid-1840s. The groundwork was laid by Gottfried Duden, whose popular German books painted an idyllic and adventurous picture of America. Even today, more Germans tour the western United States than any other European people. In 1842, Germany's economy was failing, so 21 nobles devised a plan to move massive numbers of Germans to Texas. Settlers were promised comfortable travel and guaranteed jobs. Okay. Albania. They love America like a stalker. What are they showing? Opposite Albania with the 51 star flag they'd like to see. Below, an unretouched photo of George W. Bush's visit to Albania. The unbridled enthusiasm is curious, but there's something even more striking about this image. Where are the women? Thousands of Albanians would love for their country to become the 51st state. Now, this book's from 2010, so I don't know if that's still a thing. And it's not just some offbeat splinter group requesting the inclusion. The whole country seems rabidly pro-American. Well, wait a minute. This isn't even... yeah, okay. Now I guess. So what do we have here? We have Sicily, Italy, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, sorry, I don't know, Montenegro, Serbia, Kosovo, Macedonia, Greece, Albania, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Austria, Turkey. I don't know. Alberta and British Columbia picking up the pieces of a broken Canada. So, what is this sort of seems familiar. Canada has relationship issues. The French culture of Quebec doesn't always mesh with the English-speaking culture of the other provinces. They share a love of hockey, but that's about it. So it should come as no surprise that Quebec has threatened to secede from Canada to form its own nation. The idea has heated up and cooled down over the years depending on a variety of factors. In 1995 referendum, secession lost by the slimmest margin yet, 49.5% to 50.5%. Americans may not have noticed, but their neighbor to the north came within a few thousand votes of breaking apart. Is this still going on now, Canada? I don't know. Is there still talk like that? That's like Michigan and Wisconsin, kind of talking about the Upper Peninsula. So we have Canada, Quebec, British Columbia, Alberta, Alaska. I don't really remember hearing about this, which shows how little I know. Baja, Arizona. This is what happened when there's no mail. What is this picture of? Today's Arizona and New Mexico border is a remnant of northern hatred of this man, Jefferson Davis. So, on this map, they say this map offers a view of the Arizona Territory as added to the Confederate States of America in the early 1860s. Okay, the territory included Gadsden Purchase, a strip of land that provided the easiest route across the Rockies for the planned transcontinental railroad. The railway's construction was delayed by the Civil War. When work eventually started, a more central route was chosen. So here's California, and then they had Arizona here and New Mexico here instead of kind of like that. Interesting. The present border between Arizona and New Mexico was chosen out of spite. The original boundary extended east to west, not north to south as it does today. The east to west line might have become permanent had the U.S. Congress not despised the man who initially authorized it, Jefferson Davis. He was the Confederate president, and he was delighted to welcome Arizona Territory into his new nation. What's this, Boston? That taxation without representation thing again. Opposite, the state of Boston as perceived by James H. Brennan and his cohorts. Right. Look closely at this illustration of Boston from the early 20th century. At the bottom, you'll see the genesis of what would become the city's biggest sore spot, baseball. What? State Representative James H. Brennan was hopping mad. So on a hot July day in 1919, he marched over to the clerk's office in the Massachusetts House of Representatives and filed a bill to make Boston a separate state. Brennan had his reasons. His primary beef was unjust taxation, the kind of issue Bostonians thought they'd settled 150 years before. And though there's no record of Brennan dumping any caffeinated beverages into Boston Harbor, he was just ticked off as his Tea Party predecessors, just as ticked off. Consider this quote by Brennan: "The people of Boston must fight for the right of self-determination. The Republican legislator has loaded us down with unjust taxation. He was talking specifically about $600,000 that Boston was required to pay into the state kitty for funding schools, money that would not benefit the children of Greater Boston. Required to pay the kitty for funding schools. I see. So the people of Boston didn't want to fund the rural schools. The whole thing blew over pretty quickly, but it points to a curious aspect of New England geography. Jurisdictions divide and combine with amoeba-like frequency. It started with the Pilgrims and Puritans who split off from their homeland. The two groups were independent for a time and then melded to form the province of Massachusetts Bay in 1691. Maine was actually part of Massachusetts for years until the Northerners succeeded in cleaving themselves from the state. Then there's Roger Williams, who got along with the Pilgrims for a while until they kicked him out in 1635. So he founded the settlement that would later become Rhode Island. It's a good thing this trend didn't continue. If every New England squabble led to a creation of a new state, the U.S. flag would have 1,000 stars. Charlotina, a plan to populate the Midwest with prisoners. Boom, boom. Opposite, Charlotina overlaid on a map of the area. Where are we exactly here? Wait, this is Michigan. They were gonna, like, you can hardly tell, but that's the mitten, because here's like Superior. So they were gonna fill this with prisoners. Hey man, that's why Detroit's so tough. We can handle it. Above right, the colored area represents British territory in the mid-1700s. The rest is French. Even after losing their claim to Middle America, French culture remained in the form of hundreds of place names such as Detroit or Detroit and Marquette or Marquette. We call it Detroit Marquette, but Detroit and Marquette. I think it's funny that the Germans who settled much of the region can't even pronounce the names of the cities they live in. For example, Deplay, Fondela, and Uclair. Don't laugh, you try to pronounce Lake Butte-des-Morts, Lake Butte-des-Morts, Fond du Lac, Uclair. Okay, whatever. Chesapeake, aka Atlantis. So we have Maryland, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. And this is the eastern shore of Maryland, but they're showing Chesapeake. Okay, and here's Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Delaware. Opposite one of the 1970s plans was to split off eastern Maryland into its own state. Was it just a tongue-in-cheek proposal? It depends on who you ask. Because the Chesapeake Bay separates the Delmarva Peninsula from civilization, residents have had to build a lot of bridges over the years, and tunnels and bridge-tunnel combos, including one that's 23 miles long. Why not build it all the way to Europe? Yeah, that one that got hit by knocked down by a boat or ship recently. Alright. State of Chicago. Do farmers control the mafia? Kinda. here's the state of Illinois, and here's the state of Chicago. Opposite, Chicago would not have covered much area, but it would have been the most densely populated state. Above right, the states that allowed slavery are in yellow. The striped area represents portion of Illinois that might have bore an allegiance to the South. Below right, Abe Lincoln in his very first photograph. Guys, I did not recognize him without his beard. What? Look at that photo. I know, I'm sure everybody else recognized. I would not have recognized. That's funny. Back in the early 20th century, Chicago was the cool place to be. Between 1900 and 1920, the city's population grew by more than 1 million. But the problem with massive growth is that it takes time for the government to catch up. By 1925, Chicago and Cook County contained almost 50% of the state's population, but elected only 37% of the legislature. The new urban dwellers were none too happy that a bunch of farmers were making all the laws. So in 1925, Chicago threatened to form its own state. Chippewa, land of no speed limits. Okay. Opposite, an approximation of the Chippewa boundaries. Below, yes, it's flat and empty. That's why you can drive really, really fast. There are places out west that have no speed limit, and you can see 4 miles. It's so flat. So let's see here. We have Kansas, Nebraska, Dakota, spelled with an H, and Chippewa. Chippewa is the same vicinity as modern North Dakota, except that it's shifted west, losing the best farmland and gaining wasteland. What year is this? They don't even tell you. Nowhere in here does it tell you what time period. Although they do talk about NASCAR races on the interstate. The only problem is roads are so hot. But yeah, that's kind of fun. All right. Comancheria. Oh, give them a home. Never mind, we want it back. Yeah, okay. Here's Texas, New Mexico, Wyoming, Kansas, and Comancheria. Opposite, Comancheria is incorporated into the boundaries of a modern map. Right, the empty areas in this West Texas map were Comancheria territory, whether the Texas government acknowledged it or not. Here's Santa Fe and Albuquerque. Texans are tough, but the Comanche are tougher. How else would you explain Sam Houston's willingness to cut a deal to give the Comanche people their own land? In 1837, Texas was an independent republic. President Houston's proposal was simply an acknowledgement of what everyone already knew. The Comanche dominated much of western Texas, as well as large swaths of what is now Oklahoma and New Mexico. All kinds of dirty tricks had been used to exterminate the Comanche, including poisoning more than 350 braves in 1838. But the attempts at eradication had little effect. I may have to do a whole video on this. This interests me. I Because of their incredible expertise with horses, not true of every native tribe, despite what you see in movies, the Comanche were probably the best cavalry force in the world. It is reported that Comanche horsemen were able to ride under a horse during battle, making them nearly impossible to hit. Yeah, I've heard that. And let's be honest, because they weren't afraid to make war, the Comanche were rightly feared by settlers. Of course, the tribe would likely counter that they attacked only trespassers on their land. Fair enough. The bottom line is that many Texas leaders wanted to wall off the Comanche by setting specific boundaries. Had such a plan been ratified, it's possible that those boundaries would have later become the outline of a new state. The Texas Congress did not ratify Houston's plan. They hoped that, given enough time and enough new settlers, they would simply overpower the Comanche. In the end, that proved true.